What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over how we can finalize our hurt boxes and our hitboxes to work in a traditional platform setting. So we still have plenty more we can do with these to make them better, but in terms of the actual logic when a collision occurs, it's pretty simple. What we need to do, and where we left off last time, is determine what characters got hit and how much damage we want to deal to them. Now we had this working, but when we switched over to these complex hurt boxes, as I like to call them, which is basically all these hurt boxes that move around with our body parts, as you can see on my character. As I jump, the hurt boxes move with the character. This is traditional platform fighter stuff. When we moved over to that, and we were using our collision logic, we would actually collide with multiple of the hurt boxes and deal the damage for every single collision, which is not what we want. So in this case, we have to determine which one we want to hit, and if we want to do it for, say, as an example, we hit multiple characters with one hitbox, do we want to do the damage to both of them? And that sort of thing. So today we're going to be fixing up all that, as well as going over a little bit of stuff for hitbox order, because when we get things into like the tips of swords and these other properties of hitboxes, then you're going to realize that there are things that throw a wrench in our plans. So again, if you have like hitboxes that do more damage depending on where they are, or certain ones that should hit first or after, we're going to need priority for all of that, and we're going to need to know about all that stuff. So that's all stuff we'll be speaking about today and talking about, and we'll go into more implementation as we get further in the series for those more complex things. But this is going to be setting it up to support this very early on. So to get started on this, we'll go into our base character blueprint, or in this case, what we were calling it last was our SSB template character BP. I'm going to switch this to base character BP, and you'll see how I do that in a second. But go inside your SSB template character, or whatever you called your main character, your first character that you're doing all this logic in. So anyway, guys, if you haven't seen any episode of this tutorial series, you may want to catch up. I believe we're on episode 22 at the moment. So if you are interested, I'll leave a link right here in this icon in the top right corner for you to get caught up in the entire series and everything we've done so far. Otherwise, I will link the last episode that we did. That was when we started doing these complex hurt boxes that go around our parts of our character, because you will need that for the logic we are doing today. So starting off, I've went ahead and put in the rest of the hurt boxes. So I have head, body, left upper arm, left lower arm, right upper arm, right lower arm, left upper leg, left lower leg, right upper leg, right lower leg. And a lot of times games may have more advanced ones than this to make it more specific, but this is something I made in probably like 20 minutes combined. So it's not too bad if you want to add more, but I didn't feel the need to get super specific with it. It can always be refined or changed later. But now the character is fully engulfed in this sort of hurt box section that we can use to check collision against any attacks, and really anything, like any sort of collision. So with that done, we can go and we want to copy this logic over. We want to make this into our base character. Now, if you plan on having characters that don't have any of these, you may not want to put these in your base character. However, I'm going to leave them all for now, and we will just deactivate other ones in children components if we don't want them. So the way I see it is, instead of going into our other characters, we do have this SSB template character 2 BP, but instead of going in there and adding all these components and doing all that stuff for the hurt box again, all we should really do is make a child of this class that already has everything. I mean, it even has these functions in here, which I didn't put in the second one yet. So the way I see it, there's no reason to copy this logic over when we could have a base character blueprint and all the other character blueprints could be children of that. And so I'm going to do this with you live, just because reparenting can be something that's very confusing, and doing this and trying to explain it afterward could be very, very confusing. So we get into our base character blueprint. This has all my logic that I want for the character I've been using. And earlier, I was using a separate character. I have not updated him in some time, so you can see he does not have the functions that I have, and he doesn't have all the hurt boxes either. So this character is essentially pretty worthless at the moment, because it doesn't work with a lot of the logic that we have built in the first character. So I've renamed the file to base character blueprint. That's all I've done so far. What we're going to do now is make this the parent blueprint character class. That way all future character BPs can copy this logic. The way I'm actually going to do this is I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this SSB. Let's change the name entirely. Let's say Mannequin BP. Okay, so now I have two classes that are exactly the same, and this will compile fine, and it has all this logic. Now, the reason I did that is because I still have two characters that I want to be able to play as, and I don't really want to ever play as my base character blueprint. The base character BP is just used as a wrapper class to store all the data that all characters will need or have access to. And so now what we're going to do in our base character BP is we are going to get rid of anything that we don't want specific to the character. So what I mean by that is if I don't want a mesh on my base character BP, and I don't because every character should have their own mesh, right? When you're playing Super Smash Bros, you have Mario, Luigi. They don't look exactly the same. That wouldn't make any sense if they all look like Mario. So in my base character BP, okay, we want to get rid of the mesh. And I mean, you don't want to delete it because you want these to be inherited, but literally just undo it. Make sure there's no mesh there. Now, as for the hurt boxes, you can do what you want with them. They are just assigned to a parent socket, which may need to be adjusted depending on the character that you have, just because, you know, certain characters look different. For example, if you tried to apply the same hurt boxes on, say, Duck Hunt as you did Bowser, they're going to be completely different. So you might have to change these anyway. One thing you can do is just remove the static mesh on all of these if you like. I actually remove the material in that case, which doesn't matter. You can do that too. But there we go. If you remove the static mesh on all of them, this becomes an empty collider. But it's got all the logic that our character still needs. Now, this logic is going to be all of what we've done for going through platforms and setting character references and controlling other players in keyboard mode and debug things. All this stuff is all going to be stuff that we want to use in all of our characters. So now in our Mannequin BP, which you can see kept all the properties that we had. So set your class to be the base character blueprint. It's going to say following interfaces are already implemented, continue reparenting. If you were using my base character interface, which is something we set up quite a few episodes ago regarding respawning and setting character references. At this point, I'm fine with reparenting it though. Now, there are going to be a few issues because you have all these variables in here that the parent also has, and you can't actually have them both. So you can see function is already used, property associated with this can't be found. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete all of these and all this logic in here. So to make it easier, delete all the logic first. Remember, this is in Mannequin BP, my specific character, not base character blueprint. Keep everything in base character blueprint. And then delete everything here. Delete your two functions. Keep the construction script. And delete all those variables. Now when you compile, everything should go back to normal on that character. So what we've done is make the Mannequin BP a child of base character blueprint. So it already inherits all this logic. However, it doesn't do anything on its own yet. So in the future, we'll be using this to separate characters further, right? But for now, when we just want to make these other characters and attach these hurt boxes and this functionality, anything we change in base character BP will be changed for Mannequin BP. Now, it has inherited the base character interface now as opposed to implemented it here, which is perfectly fine. It won't cause any issues, but just so you're aware, it is going to look a little bit different here. And now for all your other characters that you already have, not the duplicated one, for example, the second character that I had, I can do the same thing. If I change the class, the parent class, to base character BP and reparent it, then it's going to say the same stuff. You're going to get errors because you have duplicated logic, but you can Control A and delete, or select it all and delete it. And I didn't make the functions in this class, so I don't have to do that, but I can get rid of all these variables as well. And be good to go. Okay. So now at this point, I have 2 characters that function completely correctly. At this point, our hurt boxes will still need to be reassigned to this specific character. So if you want to keep up with the capsule, like the way I did, you can just put these back in as the static mesh. You can select them all like I've done here and do it. And you can even go in and assign the material like this. And there you go. Just like that, our new character that we never had working with all of our logic before can be used in the game with the hurt boxes and the new hitboxes. So if I select them and I go to this map, you can see they do have their hurt boxes on it now. And looks like I accidentally left the components on the character as well that we don't need. So if you go here, you can delete these as well on your mannequin BP and SSB template character. You can get rid of all these old components. We don't need them. Remember, we are going to be using the inherited ones. That's why you can see 2 names. So delete these extra hurt boxes that came from the duplication and the additional floating player name reference. And so once you've taken them out, do what I did with the second character. Just go through and select the capsule and select the hurt box material. Okay, that'll fix up duplicates on there. And then on your second character, make sure you get rid of the floating nickname additional component. And now let's try it again. And when we play, everything should look correct. And there we go. So everything looks good. We now have hurt boxes on our second character. So we can even attack them. Just like we normally would. Now, that's just something additional that I wanted to show because even though it doesn't directly tie into the hitbox logic we're changing today, it is important if you want to work with your other characters while you're doing these attacks and trying out this collision. It's good to know how to change these characters to all work with that. The other thing you will want to do is we set our character type to be a certain character that we spawn in the character select screen. But when we do this in our game mode, so if we go to our game mode, then when we go to spawn all the characters, which should happen in begin play, we'll call the spawn players function. Again, everything looks like it got kind of mushed together when I updated it, but I'll clean this up later as to not confuse you guys. However, you will have 2 spots where you're spawning characters. You'll be spawning them based off the character class. So initially, once in begin play, and we're going to change base character BP to mannequin BP. We don't ever want to physically control the base character blueprint. So change that to mannequin BP. And then in the spawn player function, we do the same logic. So change base character BP to mannequin BP again. And now with that done, you can close out the character select and the base game mode. And we should be able to take control of our initial mannequin yet again. There you go. So now everything is fully functioning. And we're able to add new characters without any issue at all. One other thing I would like to show you before we get into the hitbox logic is how to avoid the characters from going off into the x-axis or going deeper into the screen or closer to the screen. We may want this for visual effect down the line, like how in Super Smash Bros. You can launch the characters off and they collide with the camera. But in terms of actual logic, we don't want them going further into the scene or closer, at least not by default. The only time we'd want that to happen is if we have level transitions or something where we're going between 2 areas of the battlefield. We don't want that as default behavior. So to fix this, if you go to your base character blueprint and go to character movement and go to constraint, just type in constraint up here, constrain to plane and plane constraint normal X1. Doing this means that this will never be changed. So as it says here, so that in the comment, if for example you want to constrain movement to the XZ plane so that Y cannot change, the normal would be set to X0, Y1, Z0. And so we're setting X to be 1 so that the X cannot change. And if you look at this, when you see this little graphic in the bottom left, X is the depth. So forward or backward. And we don't want the players to be able to go into those axes. So if you set this up on the character movement component, that'll fix your issue. Your other characters, now that they are children of the base character, should inherit this. But if they don't inherit it, you can just set it here. They almost definitely will. However, like in this case, see how it actually did not? It's because I changed it first in the base character blueprint and then parented it after. So if you did it out of order like I did, you'll need to fix it. Otherwise, they will almost definitely already be good to go. And any future character should be good to go. There you go. So characters cannot go into the x-axis anymore, and thus you can actually fight them without them flying all over the place. Now, let's get into the rest of the hitbox logic that we'll be editing today. When we go into our HitboxActorBP, this is the one that we spawn when we use an attack. Nothing has changed with the spawning. In fact, nothing's changed with anything other than check collision. The way we're checking collision is what we're going to have to modify today, because we have to figure out what it is that we are colliding with. We can hit multiple hurt boxes on one character. And I'm actually realize I closed it out. I am going to open Mannequin BP up again. That way you guys can see this. So if a hitbox were to collide with, say, the left upper leg and the body, we're basically determining which hurt box we want to take the damage. Now, it might not matter if you just have an attack that does a base damage and you only want it to hit once, then this method will work perfectly fine. As I said, in the future, we will need to set up a priority order for which hurt boxes get hit first, or a priority order on the hitboxes that spawn from an attack to determine which hitbox should collide. If multiple collide and we only want the attack to do deal damage one time, then we have to set a priority order on the hitboxes themselves. So just a heads up there. Now I'm going to show you the old logic. So we initially had this logic. This was the collision logic without hurt boxes, and I removed that in the prior episode and I left it in a comment down here. Now this is the collision logic hurt boxes with no restrictions, and what I mean by that is it would check to see if we were overlapping any static mesh components, check to see in here if they were the hurt box components, and then cast the character and call take damage. This was done in a loop, so it would happen for every collision that occurred, they would deal damage. So if I collided with the left upper leg of the character and the body of the character, they're taking damage 2 times. We don't want that anymore. So this is the new updated method to support only dealing damage 1 time, but for every actor. Because we also don't want to deal damage to the wrong actor. So if we collide with 2 actors, 2 other characters, while we're using our attack, we want them both to take damage separately. So I've changed this up a little bit, how we've handled it. I'll go through the whole function with you again. However, it should be very similar. You shouldn't have to do too many things to get it to work. So in our check collision event, we get overlapping components, which is literally get overlapping components, just like that. All right. And then we go into a for each loop. I'll do this down below so you can follow what I'm doing, but just know I'm mimicking the behavior up top. We then drag off the array element, and the overlapping elements of this hitbox, we're looking for only static mesh components. We know all of our hurt boxes are static mesh components. Now, we may on cast fail do something to check against items, because in Smash Bros. And a lot of platform fighters, you have items that you can punch or stage things that you can punch and perform an action. So we don't only want to do this logic against a character, but for now, we're only worried about the character. So keep that in mind. So we know all hurt boxes on characters are static mesh components. What we want to check now is we want to see if the hitbox that we are spawning is not their owner. The hitbox's owner that is being spawned is not the owner of the hurt box that it is overlapping with. Meaning, say we're playing as Ike in Super Smash Bros. And he uses an attack that spawns a hitbox. The hitbox collides with his own hurtbox. Unless this is intentional to damage ourselves, which there are some moves that do that, then we don't want to perform this logic. We don't want to hurt ourselves. So what I do is you can either drag off this cast, or I just brought off the array element, but it doesn't really matter. Get the owner, and then drag off of this and say not equal be an object type, and then you want to check the owner of this hitbox. So the static mesh component owner and the hitbox owner. And if they're not equal to each other, if this is true, we do a branch. If this is true, then I perform a function called check complex collision. Now, we had this function in the past. I believe we made it in the last episode. However, we did upgrade it. So let's go into this function and check it out. So this is what was here before. We were just checking to see if it had the HB substring in it. Basically, all of our static mesh components have HB underscore. And so that's how I was identifying it as a hurtbox for our... We have a function in our BaseCharacterBP called retrieve hurtboxes, and it checks that string and says, yep, this is a component I should add to this hurtbox array, and then it does. Great. However, we don't necessarily want to actually do this check again here, when we could just check if the character hurtboxes array contains this item. So I'm going to delete this from check complex hurtboxes. And I'm going to update our function itself a bit. If you click on the function, you can look at your input and output parameters. And we are going to update. We had overlapped object, which was a static mesh component. This is something that we did have, but we were just getting the name of it and checking it for the HB underscore. Now what we're doing is we are using it to check the array that the array of the player that could contain it. But we're also passing in the owning character. I made it default. I made it just an actor so we could use it as vaguely as we wanted. If we wanted to check complex collision against other objects, we could still do so. But I called it owning character, and I made it an actor. And you can add a new input parameter by clicking right here. And we already have this has collision occurred Boolean. So now I drag off the owning character and I cast to our BaseCharacterBP, just like that. Then I drag off my BaseCharacterBP to get hurtboxes, get our array that we set in the BaseCharacterBP. Drag off of this once more and type contains item. And then bring in the overlapped item. And then bring that Boolean into the return node for has collision occurred. So basically, what that does is, okay, we know we've collided with a static mesh component. Let's see if this is actually a hurtbox component. And this is important because there are a ton of static mesh components. You know, you can have a static mesh component that's a little hat for your character. That doesn't necessarily mean that you want to deal damage if a collision with that occurred. So we check this first to eliminate running this check more than we have to, more times than we have to, because we don't want to actually like check every single component in the world for collision. That would be very slow. So we run this check to limit the options that we have, and then we run this check to make sure it's actually a component that we can hit and deal damage to. However, in this case, I actually should be doing a branch here, and I'm not, believe it or not. Okay, so I've updated this. I technically skipped a little part there. And so I brought this has collision occurred into a branch now, the return node. And so only if this collision occurred do we want to add this actor to the list of actors that'll be taking damage. So what I've done is I've kept track of the characters that we've collided with. That way we can call take damage on them after the fact. Because before we were doing it right in the middle of the loop, but we also don't always want to do that. So say we deal damage, we collide with someone, but it's something that is going to deal damage to the character after, such as a throw or some sort of delayed attack. In this case, we don't necessarily want to deal damage right away, so grabbing the actors that'll receive damage is very useful for the future as well. And so all I've done for this is make a new variable. I've called it collided actors, and I've kept it of type actor yet again. That way, so I could potentially use this for items or stage, thingamabobs down the road, and that way we don't have to worry if it's a character or not, but just if it's any actor, we can check against it and use it. And it is subject to change. We may decide we want different ones for characters, actors, whatever. But for now, I've kept them all as actor. And the way you do this is you add a new variable, select the type, and search for actor, object reference right here. Then when you click on the variable, you might have to compile and save first. you can click on this little thing right here. It'll look like this pill, and then you can select this array. Now, before we go any farther, drag off of collide actors, type add unique, and pass in. I passed it in from here. The array elements get owner here, because this array element is theoretically the static mesh component. I'm going to make our lives a little bit easier by changing this to that, as I did down below here, just because it's a little bit neater that way. So the owner of the static mesh component goes over here, has a reroute node, and comes up here. That's what I'm adding here. That's because the owner of the static mesh component is the owner of the hurtbox if this branch is true, and if it's a hurtbox colliding with a hitbox, we want to deal damage to that character. So this is a character that we are dealing damage to. And we'll need to remove them once this is done if the hitbox is going to be around for a bit. However, the hitbox should destroy itself, so it shouldn't really be an issue. For longer lasting hitboxes, we'll actually do something slightly different like we did in the fighting game, so it's not really a concern. And right there, I actually end the loop logic. We do more on completed, but instead of doing it in one continuous event now, I actually break it up a bit. So once this for loop is done, it's going to go into completed. So if you drag off completed and bring it into this next section here, it doesn't really matter how you do this. I just did this to break it up so that you could read it a little bit more easily. Then what we're going to do is loop through our collided actors and determine which ones we want to hit. So basically, we did add unique because add unique will not add an item to the array that's already in there. In some cases, you want this. So say you have a collision overlap and you want to determine all the items that are in there. However, you have like another collider that can also add to this array. So say you have 2 collision overlaps. You may want to add the same item to say that it's in both. It's in both of these collision overlaps, and you could add it to the array. That is a case you wouldn't want to add unique. In this case, when we want to deal multiple attacks or deal damage multiple times with one attack, then we'll do that with multiple hitboxes spawned from the move. So in this case, we want our hitbox, which has the collided actors array here that we made, to know what objects, what actors it's colliding with, and that's it. So we've done add unique here, and then we can loop through it immediately after once the loop is completed. Once this loop is completed, we can go into this loop immediately after, where we loop through, cast it to the type, and then perform the corresponding logic. So if we loop through this, and we cast to SSB template character, and it succeeds, then we do the same logic we've been doing for take damage. I haven't changed anything here. We grab the hitbox's damage, we call take damage on the character that this object is, and then we perform the launch logic. So if we play our game now, and I will make this look legitimate, we'll just put in STB, and we'll do this here, and I will drop a character onto myself, or somewhere up out of reach. When we get the camera, this won't be so much of an issue, but okay, so while we're here, I can charge up an attack and do my damage, whatever, as intended. Now you should see that the damage is not like going to 100 damage instantly if that's not what I put in. Before, in the last episode, it was skyrocketing like 100% instantly because the attack I was using was colliding with all the characters' hurtboxes and dealing damage for each one. Now it's dealing damage just to the character that the hurtbox hit. We haven't set up a priority order yet. However, the logic we have now does actually support it. We could filter it very easily through it. The other thing I can do now is collide with multiple characters with the same hitbox, and they'll both take the corresponding and correct damage. You can see they both took damage. The one I kind of knocked off into oblivion, and so he died, but you could see that he had damage prior. And so there you go, guys. That's how you can set up true platform fighter hitboxes and hurtboxes. This is how it works a lot of times in the actual games. Of course, they're a lot more advanced. They have a lot more properties. You can actually look up the Super Smash Brothers hitbox properties. They are open on a wiki, and you can check them out. And so we'll be covering each of those mechanics. However, at their very core, this is the main thing that we need to have our attacks start functioning properly and working as they should in a platform fighter. So that's all I got for you today, guys. If you enjoyed this video and it helped you make your platform fighter, please subscribe. It does more for me and the channel than anything else you can do. I really, really appreciate it. Speaking of, I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for all the love and all the support that you've given this series and this channel. I really, really, really appreciate it. At the time of making this episode, we are about to hit 4,000 subscribers, and that is pretty unbelievable. So thank you guys so much for all the love and support, for real. It is just really, really kind, and I really appreciate it. If you did have any issues with this tutorial or any of my other tutorials or series, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description that'll help you out. And like I said, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.